Today's video is a story of what happens when one person is technologically incompetent and one person is very technologically competent and gracious, and what can happen when we still are able to collaborate and put things together. So you'll notice today's video is a little bit chopped up. I have a Zoom call set up, forgot to press record, and lost the interactive component of that, but thankfully my guest was recording on their end, and so you'll see a whole lot less of me and more of our guest, who has a lot to say. Our guest is Ed Cross, also known as the Restoration Lawyer. He is the president of the law offices of Edward H. Cross and Associates, and for the last 25 years has been advocating and litigating on behalf of restoration contractors. Most of you should be aware of what the RIA, the Restoration Industry Association, has been doing, and more specifically Ed's work with the AGA committee, the Advocacy and Government Affairs. And so it's been very encouraging to see the RIA pivot to focus on advocacy and how they have taken a step in the right direction to lead by example. One of the things Mark has asked, in his document, our greatest need is for people to come together rather than being fragmented. And so RIA and IICRC have done that. Ed will talk about some of that and what came out of the conference last year, two organizations aligning to better represent restoration contractors and focus in their fields of expertise to collaborate. And so the same is being asked of contractors. There are so many things that need to be fixed in our industry under the leadership of the RIA and the committees with the third-party administrators, third-party consultants, and then the pricing. Those are the focuses for this year and moving forward to try to gain momentum there. And there's some exciting things that Ed will talk about and that anyone can look up on the RIA website or see the updates there. So Ed shares a lot more of his story and how he got into law. And if you're excited about what Ed has been doing and the momentum of the AGA, it sounds like we owe a debt of gratitude to Alice Cooper. So we'll get into that story right now.
Okay, so you were at a point in your career, you were lean and mean and rocking, and you auditioned for Alice Cooper?
I did, yeah.
As the drummer?
Yes.
Okay, how long have you been drumming then?
46 years.
You still tinker, or are you still active?
I don't play out professionally anymore. I had my big grand finale back in May of last year. I had a big show. I played a legal parody of the rock opera Tommy by The Who. Wow. And I knew I'd never be able to top it again, so I decided that would be my last professional performance. At the end of the show, I trashed my drum kit in classic Keith Moon style. A heck of a lot of fun.
Went out like a rock star?
Yeah, I tried.
So if Alice Cooper had called and said yes, then we may never be where we are right now.
Well, the guy who got that gig played for Alice Cooper for a bunch of years, and then afterwards got hired to join a band called Kiss. And his name is Eric Singer, and he's on tour with Kiss right now to this day. And so who knows, I might have ended up in Kiss.
Well, there you go. Wow. That's,
probably not.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah, it was fun.
So, and from what you were saying, you thought you had the gig, right? And then it was an agonizing 2 weeks of waiting by the phone?
Yeah, I was really ready for that audition. And they wouldn't say what songs we were going to play. They said, we're just going to wing it. And so we ended up playing Schools Out and Under My Wheels and Poison. And I really thrashed those drums. And
Like
Alice asked me afterwards if I broke the guy's snare drum. And I said,
Oh, wow.
well, this isn't a jazz band. And he laughed. I made Alice Cooper laugh. And so that was worth going over there just for that. And then I walked out, and the manager pulled me aside. He says, I think you got this gig. I was pretty excited, to say the
Yeah.
least. And I went home and stared at the phone for 2 weeks, waiting for it to ring.
Oh man! So was joining the legal field on your radar at that time, or were you planning to go full-fledged rock star?
When I was in the 4th grade, one time I was standing out on the playground, and I had a picture in my mind of what it would be like to stand in front of a jury and speak to a jury. And I saw myself in a light gray suit talking to 12 people and trying to convince them of something. I don't know what.
Yeah.
And, I always wanted to try to pursue something huge. And I've been on stage since I was a little kid, first as a drummer, and now doing this. And, people say, wow, that's a radical transition going from rock and roll to law. And in a way, it's really not. We're getting up in front of people and trying to make an impact, trying to get a reaction out of them. And there's all different ways to do it, and it's not just with one particular haircut. One thing I didn't want to do is get involved in personal injury law, and as luck would have it, when I was clerking during law school, the only law firm that would hire me was a personal injury firm. And I ended up learning the mechanics of how those cases work. So once I became a lawyer and I got a mold case, I knew how to put together medical records for an insurance company to look at and how to present a PI claim. And it actually served me well.
Became valuable.
Yeah.
So that was, you said that you were involved in one of the first, it was a sewage loss that went to mold, and
right.
And you were involved in suing the contractor on the behest of the homeowner, correct?
I was, yeah.
Were you in construction law or real estate law, or how did that even come about?
I was not on any law. I was a brand new admittee, and the law firms were not hiring when I got out of law school. There weren't any jobs. So I had my own job at that point, my own little company. I was editing law books for law students. And I decided to continue doing that and just see what would happen. And one day I discovered that down the street from my office was the Orange County Bar Association Lawyers Referral Service. And I went in and signed up, and they referred to me a legal malpractice case. And the guy said that he had a sewage loss in his house and his lawyer didn't do anything about it, and he wanted to sue the lawyer. Well, it turns out there wasn't really much of a claim against the lawyer, but I said I'd like to handle the property damage part, and that's how it got started.
Wow. What year was that?
The sewage flood was on Cinco de Mayo, May 5th of 1995. And I got onto the case a few months after that, and it was really my first referral as a lawyer. And there were issues with the sufficiency of the cleaning there and the remediation, and we brought in Peter Stierk's company, Environmental Testing and Technology, and I started to learn about indoor air quality. About 2 months before Cinco de Mayo, the house had appraised on a refinance for $80,000, and the recovery that we got in the case was $688,000. It turned out to be one of California's first big mold cases. And then that led to a surge of referrals coming into my office from hygienists and from occupational health physicians because they were needing lawyers to help some of these people out. And in a very short period of time, I had over 150 mold cases under my roof, and had a dozen employees, and we were knocking around on those pretty heavily through the 1990s. And around 1996, some restorers invited me to come and speak for the Carpet and Fabric Care Institute in Southern California. They said, come to our convention and give a presentation as to what we need to do so that you won't sue us.
Okay.
And so I did, and they started offering me work, and I felt much more comfortable working in that environment. Having grown up in the construction business, I just think I'm better suited to work with companies as opposed to consumers.
Yeah. Well, it's a small world. My first AMRT course was with Peter Sirk.
Oh, yes.
I think that was like 2002 or something like that. So,
Yeah. He's a great mentor, an incredible asset to the entire industry. And I was fortunate enough to work with him and Rachel Adams and some of the other experts on developing the exam you took for the AMRT. And I wrote the legal part of that. So you've got me to thank.
Yeah, I remember he was very knowledgeable and very in-depth, but also helped break it down so it was usable information.
Well, he's got that good, straightforward German logic that he follows. And he's a very,
sometimes
very
what
good
happens,
teacher.
though, is especially when you've been doing it a long time, you kind of like the sound of your own voice, and it's more about the bravado than actually helping people trying to do it right. So that's interesting.
Yeah, great guy. And in the late 90s, the insurance companies stopped paying out any kind of real money on mold-related illness cases. So that was kind of the handwriting on the wall. And I got very lucky with the timing on that. I happened to be in the right place at the right time and managed to settle a whole bunch of those cases when it was really lucrative. And then I got out. I mean, it got to the point where there was nothing you could show the insurance companies where they would pay, and I went to a mediation on what I thought was the strongest mold-related illness case I'd ever seen or had. I mean, we really, really dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, and the insurance company said, "We're sorry, we do not pay on mold-related illness claims." And unfortunately, a lot of bogus ones had been filed. And so it ruined it for those who had the good cases, to the point where the insurance company says, "We don't care what you say, we're not going to pay any money for that." We ended up settling that case, by the way. They put in an extra category of money in the settlement, kind of undefined. They've got this for property damage and then just some extra money. But their policy was they don't pay on illness claims.
Well, that was, my start was we had a mold remediation division at a local service master that was a new thing, and insurance companies were still paying on the I think what was the structural, Ed McMahon was one of the big ones, right?
It was,
that everybody refers to.
That was a big case.
So it was still a time when the insurance companies were paying and figuring out how to, I guess, not pay.
Right.
So
the first class, and got very interested in the science end of it, and I ended up earning a certification as an indoor air quality professional from AEE, and then I went on to take the WRT class, and I earned a certification as a WRT. And I didn't maintain those certifications because I wasn't using them. But back when I held myself out as an indoor environmental lawyer, it was nice to have those credentials. And then later on, I was honored to have been invited to participate in the drafting and writing of the IICRC's water damage and mold standards. And that was a very, very illuminating experience for me to be able to be in the room with so many experts, listening to them debate those issues. And you hear the arguments from both sides, and made me much better equipped to litigate the cases later, because I had this unlimited source of expert opinion, which normally you'd pay a couple $100 an hour for. Here it's just, it's just flooding in for free. It's wonderful. It's very rewarding.
So you were working on the S500 and the 520 then? Yeah,
very deeply on the 520, and I handled the legal committee there, and I was also on the main committee. For the viewers who haven't seen it yet, there's an excellent interview that Michelle Blevins did with you. It talks a little bit about your background and how you got started, and I enjoyed watching that.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you very much. Are you litigating with restorers nationwide, or still focusing mostly in California, or?
It's all over the country, and I'm currently licensed in California and Hawaii. I will soon be licensed in New York and North Carolina. For the states where I'm not licensed, I work in conjunction with a local lawyer, because each state wants to have one of its own licensees on each case. So I work on a consulting basis to lawyers outside of California and Hawaii, and basically co-counsel cases with them.
So a local lawyer might take the case, and then you come in.
I heard that. That was a Freudian slip there.
I don't think I said liar. I said lawyer.
Sounded like a Jim Carrey movie to me. But anyway, go on.
Yeah. The pen is blue.
So I'd have several dozen speaking engagements for RIA and taught webinars for them. I was a columnist for them, published a bunch of articles, and they were always very supportive of me, and I was very grateful to them for that. And then last year in early 2019, I was approached about running the RIA's advocacy group. And frankly, I was a little skeptical about it. And like most associations that are nearly 3/4 of a century old, RIA has had its blemishes. It's had its stumbles along the way. But what I heard when Mark Springer contacted me about this was a brand new, fresh, and innovative idea by RIA to kind of rebrand itself, not just as an educational group, but also as an advocacy group. And I was well aware of the different problems that restorers were facing and that they were getting worse. There are some very strong pro-consumer laws here that were not written with the emergency service contractor in mind. Mark explained to me how much horsepower and energy the RIA was willing to put into this, and I came to see that RIA is a very different organization now. There's fresh, young, new leadership there, and they're really thinking outside of the box, and they're staying very focused on specific objectives. And there are so many issues that restorers face. I mean, it's a very complex business, legally, financially, in terms of regulations, all the litigation. And so what they've done now is they've zeroed in on some key points that they want to focus on. And they're very organized. And I just returned a few weeks ago from the Board of Directors strategic planning session at association headquarters in New Jersey, and was absolutely delighted to hear how much enthusiasm the Board of Directors has for the advocacy initiative, and how much energy the new management company, association headquarters, and the CEO, Christy Cohen, are putting into it. And they're really, really working hard and making some very smart decisions. And they've got a huge team of people. And there's a group for social media. There's a group for print publications. There's a very strong group to build membership. And I mean, there's an army of people there. And I'm very optimistic about what's going to be accomplished. We had an impact in 2019. It was a big boost on morale, and we can talk a little bit about that. RIA is very much an education organization. IICRC is a standards writing and certification organization. The people at RIA put in a tremendous amount of effort and intellectual horsepower into working on a fire damage standard. Well, in the meantime, IICRC had plans to do a fire damage standard as well, and you could imagine the problems it would create in the marketplace if there were two different standards for fire damage restoration. And so, RIA and IICRC are a great match for each other. They complement each other, and they're not competitors. And so by virtue of the mutual benefit agreement, which was signed in a live signing ceremony at our annual convention last year in Phoenix, RIA is now focused on education and advocacy, and the IICRC is focused on standards writing and certification. And IICRC has a new president who's coming on board, and he is quite interested and quite well versed in advocacy himself, and we're looking forward to working with him. And we plan to be in lockstep with IICRC all the way going forward, and it's a good match. It was meant to be. Yeah, two giants in the industry, working together. Yeah. I think you had said out of that outflow
of the AGA really identified 3 key areas: the TPAs, the TPCs, and then pricing. I'm pretty sure everybody knows, but TPAs, the third-party administrators, and then the TPCs, the third-party consultants, and then pricing kind of speaks for itself.
Right.
Can you talk to how did those conversations come about as far as solidifying those 3 areas, and then the position paper, which I understand is the first for the RIA, correct?
Right. Yeah, it is. So first, as kind of an overarching statement, the RIA seeks a unified voice for the restoration contractor. And what I experienced and what many people experienced is that the industry was very fragmented. Everybody was facing a similar set of problems, but they were approaching them in different ways. And the other stakeholders were sometimes dividing and conquering. And the classic example is when an adjuster or a third-party building consultant shows up on a job or looks at an invoice and tells the contractor, you know what, your competitor down the street is not charging for this, or your competitor down the street is not doing it this way. And what we're doing is we are sharing information between the contractors to figure out what they are actually doing and coming up with position papers that say that. So when an adjuster or consultant comes along and says, well, the guy down the street isn't doing it this way,
right,
or this is not standard or usual and customary, you could say, excuse me, sir, but here, or ma'am, here is what we have from the Restoration Industry Association. This is a peer-reviewed position of our industry as a whole. And this is one of many tangible benefits that restorers are going to get from the AGA, which is position papers. There's no need for you to reinvent the wheel every time you get hit with some sort of argument or some sort of challenge from an adjuster or a third-party consultant. What we're doing is we're formulating the arguments that you can use, that you can present. It's going to be ready for you, and you can copy and paste this into emails, and you can use this stuff to help make sure that the playing field is really leveled for restoration contractors, both legally and financially. So the mission of RIA is to educate, advocate, and elevate the restoration industry. And so we are going to accomplish that by involving the members and the major industry stakeholders in the process that we're undertaking. We have collected from them a list of issues they see as the biggest and most important challenges. All right. Then we pick out from those the ones that appear to be the top priorities. We form subcommittees on those. The subcommittees are staffed with the leading experts in the country on those particular issues. They research the issues, they come up with positions, they prepare drafts of the positions, send them up to us in the AGA committee. We comment on them, we revise them, we send them back to the subcommittee, we give them feedback. Working in conjunction with the subcommittee, we reach a consensus as to what should be in the position paper. And then we send it up finally to the RIA Board of Directors, and it doesn't get published until it has been approved on all 3 of those levels. So the restorer can have confidence in knowing that lots of different experts from lots of different parts of the country have looked at this. And then another part of our objective to achieve the mission is to broadly communicate our progress so that everybody understands the impact that the AGA is making on the industry. And lastly, of course, we need to raise financial resources to fund this effort. It's a lot of time, and there's a lot of expenses that are involved with it, and the new management company is going to be a good steward of those resources. So we went through that process, and what the industry told us was that they were very concerned about the prices in standardized pricing platforms, that they were very concerned about some of the tactics of third-party administrators, And lastly, that they were concerned about some of the tactics and things they saw as being unfair from third-party consultants. And so we started calling them TPCs. TPCs include independent adjusters, they include bill reviewers, they include any third party who is not the contractor, the restorer, or the insurance company, somebody who's brought in from the outside. And naturally, we have to address those issues in a different way. It's a very different dynamic. When somebody's working for a TPA, they sign up for that. They do it voluntarily, but a TPC is thrust upon the restoration contractor against his or her will, and that creates a different set of issues, as you can imagine. Sorry that answer was so long. I received a flood of emails from all over the country from people saying, you know what, finally our voice is being heard, finally some things are moving in the right direction, we're getting some things turned around here. Most notably, the senior leadership of RIA met with Exactware's president, Mike Fulton, Exactware's vice president of pricing, Greg Pine, and Bill Loveland, who, as I said, was one of the founders. And it's important for everybody to understand that Exactware has acknowledged that the price methodology needs some work. It needs to be adjusted. And, prices were pretty static back in the day of the Great Recession. But prices are much more dynamic now, and there's some new things that need to be implemented to make sure that the pricing stays valid and current and up to date. And yes, we are looking for certain trades in certain markets to get paid a higher price. But the point of this is not just for contractors to get paid more money. The point of this is for contractors to get paid a fair price. And when we say fair, we don't just mean fair to the contractor. We mean fair to the customer, and we mean fair to the insurance company as well. Because if it's not fair to everybody involved, it's not sustainable. And it has to be sustainable. And what's happening right now with stagnant prices being used, Xactimate being weaponized against restorers, good restoration companies having to close their doors, TPAs having trouble with recruitment, and many other problems, it's not sustainable. And the public is going to suffer. If there is a major cat loss, for example, and some adjuster comes out and they try to insist that the homeowner accept a settlement based on prices that are 3 years old, I mean, that doesn't work. That affects consumers across the country. It impacts the whole economy. This issue is that big. It's that important. And so we applaud and thank Exactware for the efforts that they have shown. Several important initiatives that Exactware is working on with us. We're not here to pick a fight with Exactware. We're not here to pick a fight with the TPAs or with the insurance carriers. We respect the insurance carriers, but we want to make sure that this is sustainable and that this is fair. So what we are doing is we are focusing on coming up with real solutions. All right, we're not just wallowing in the problems. This set of issues is not going to get resolved by a bunch of posts on Facebook. All right, it's going to take face-to-face meetings with the decision makers to help them understand that in the court of public opinion, they might end up on the wrong side of this if they don't listen to what we have to say. Restorers, contractors, buy approximately 80,000 Xactimate licenses per year. All right, the restoration industry is roughly 50% of the Xactimate licenses that are out there. So ladies and gentlemen, we have a voice. It's a real voice, and it's an important one. And they are listening to us, they are paying attention, and they are willing to implement some changes that we believe are going to move this in the right direction. And we thank Exactware for that very much.
I think the Loveland thing kind of made a lot of people aware. I know that kind of made me aware that there was a shift happening in RIA and
it's an impact.
Conversations with you. So,
and that is really boosting restorers' morale, and that's a positive impact. And the last couple of years, restorers have been coming into my office saying, "Oh my gosh, Ed, we're just getting beat up. The TPAs are beating us up." And we sign up for a TPA program, committing to a pretty modest price to begin with, but then they come back with 12 or 15 corrections, 20 corrections on an invoice where they're slashing out items. And so we've got to fight to basically, we got to buy our check. And it's not a good situation. And, there's responsibility on both sides. And after being a lawyer for 25 years, I've learned that in every dispute, there is some validity usually to what somebody's saying on each side. Sometimes there's some misunderstandings, and there are some restorers there who are not playing by the rules. Okay, we understand that. I'm not here saying, restorers are perfect and all insurance companies are evil. That's not the point of this at all. The point of this is that some adjustments need to be made on both sides, and we, through the RIA's education arm, is working with restorers to make sure that they're doing things the right way as well.
Yeah, and you got the homeowners too. I mean, if they're caught in between a battle between the insurance companies and the restorers, they suffer, but they're not innocent in the grander picture either.
Oh, right, so, that's true.
So as far as the approach of the RIA, the AGA was or I guess the first kind of step is to commit wholeheartedly to an advocacy platform,
right?
As an association, and then the AGA was formed, and out of this came the vision that, at least for now, these are the three key areas to focus on. And so there's subcommittees in there that represent people that want to speak into those areas or have experience. Like I said, you've gathered people from the industry that are very experienced in not just understanding those areas, but winning some of those battles in a sustainable way.
Right.
And then your role shifted from a volunteer capacity leading the AGA to now what they call the restorer advocate, correct?
It didn't shift. I got additional duties. So I was and I remain the chairman of the Advocacy and Government Affairs Committee. And hopefully we will be bringing on a new chair of that committee in the near future so that I can focus more time and effort on my recent new job for RIA, which is as restoration contractor advocate. And so everybody should go to restorationindustry.org and click on the advocacy menu there. And that will take you to the article called Our Greatest Need, which is a brilliant manifesto written by my friend and colleague Mark Springer, who's truly one of the most enlightened and smart people I've ever met in my life. And what he did there was he laid out the problems, and then he laid out a specific 7-step plan to address those problems. And one of them was to form the committee, and one of them also was to hire an advocate. And the advocate, according to the plan, which I've named the blueprint, is a non-contractor. You see, I'm not in a position where any of these companies can retaliate against me. I don't hold an Xactimate license. I don't do business with TPAs, and I never will. All right? So I can go out and speak candidly with them without any concerns of retribution. And I was not involved in deciding who the advocate was going to be. I recused myself from those meetings that AGA had. AGA came up with a recommendation, and then that went up to the board of directors. I wasn't party to any of those discussions either. And I got the call one day that said I had been selected as restoration contractor advocate. The role of the advocate is to go out and campaign for the positions adopted by the Restoration Industry Association following the research and analysis of the hardworking volunteers of the AGA and its subcommittees.
Do I understand correctly that's a paid role as well?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. but that, I mean, obviously that makes sense because, as a contractor, there's things you want to say that you probably shouldn't, and
right.
And defer to that.
Yeah.
I guess, for lack of a better term, the higher power, right? So the representative power. So it's now a representative democracy.
Hope so.
And and I think it's interesting you alluded to lobbying there in California, and then I know that's part of Mark's outline. He said, long term, that's probably realistically something the RA needs to look into, and obviously that would require significant input of resources to be able
right.
to. I don't want to say compete, but in a lot of ways it is compete at that level. We're playing from behind to some degree.
Right.
And have there been more talks as to what that looks like?
The engagement of lobbyists is the 7th step in the program. And that is something that we see out on the horizon, but we're staying focused right now on the immediate pressing needs, which is to address issues with Xactimate, with the TPAs, and the third-party consultants.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get spread too thin dealing with too many different issues. There is one other thing out there that people should be aware of. There is a patent infringement lawsuit pending in the Pacific Northwest. There is the holder of a patent that relates to what I believe are some pretty ordinary drying techniques, who has sued a company up there for allegedly infringing on the patent. And this is something that could grow into something important that everybody should take a look at. And although you don't hear AGA speaking publicly on lots of different issues, rest assured that we are monitoring them, and that we will be notifying everyone as soon as developments occur. There's a lot of confidential negotiations that are going on behind the scenes, and we don't want to upset the apple cart right now by going out and naming names and saying, here's what we're working on. We're trying to foster a collaborative working relationship with these other stakeholders. And it's going to take time. If somebody's 50 pounds overweight, that didn't happen overnight, okay?
Right.
And losing 50 pounds won't happen overnight either. It took us a lot of years to get to this point, and it's going to take us some time to get out of it. But frankly, things have accelerated and proceeded at a much faster pace here than I had anticipated.
What conversations have you had with TPAs? Is contractor connection part of that? Obviously that triangle. The TPA subcommittee produced the Restoration Industry Association's first ever position paper. Next year the association is going to be 75 years old, and it's pretty amazing everything that's happened over those years. But if you look back, you'll see that no position paper has ever been put out, and the TPA subcommittee broke that glass ceiling, if you will. The TPA subcommittee is also working on a scoring system, compiling information from different restorers about their experiences working with TPAs. And I think it's going to be a very valuable member benefit for a restorer to be able to kind of get a little bit of a review about a TPA before making the big commitment to go to work for one, because it really changes the whole dynamic of a restorer's business. I mean, that's a whole different kind of business model. It's a high volume, lower profit model, and some are able to do it successfully and some crash and burn in the process. So those are the two priority items for the TPA subcommittee at this point. And then after that, I look forward to reaching out, extending an olive branch, and having some productive discussions with some of the bigger TPAs. But we're not going to name names right now. Sure. Is there anything you feel like we didn't quite touch on?
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a perception problem in this industry. Things have become entirely too adversarial. Contractors report to me all the time that they feel like adjusters, TPAs, and TPCs are ripping them off. And what I've learned in my travels is that the TPCs and the insurance companies feel like contractors are ripping them off. All right? So things have really decayed a lot. And all sides of this, all sides, need to work on improving the way the other sides perceive them. And we need to find some ways of making this less adversarial. And the way that restorers can do it is to unify, to get together, to join the RIA, to throw their support behind the AGA, and they're going to see some tangible benefits from that. We need to change the dynamic. We need to change the tenor of things so it's not so adversarial, because everybody suffers when it decays to that point. And so, the vision of RIA is to be a unified voice for the restoration contractor. And we have strength in numbers. Many hands make light work, and we need as many people as possible to get on board for this. And we believe you're going to see a good return on your investment.
I mean, if people think it's dark now, it could be headed to a much darker place. So,
right.
I think, like I said from our initial conversations, it gives me a lot of hope. That I think it's very coherent, and there's a structured approach to. And Mark breaks it down pretty accurately, and comes from the standpoint of, I'm a restorer, been doing this for many, many years, and won some battles and lost some battles.
Right.
So
yeah. In the article Our Greatest Need, which people can read on restorationindustry.org, Mark makes a pretty compelling argument that if things continue the way they are, the restoration industry will be virtually unrecognizable. So many things will change that it will really start to go sideways, and everybody's going to suffer. And so working together, we can keep that from happening. And I want to thank you, John, and all of your affiliates for their efforts in helping to get the word out and help us achieve a fair and level playing field for restorers.
Our thing is trying to develop intentionally, and you speak to that very well as far as the restorer has to help tell the story of the loss on behalf of the homeowner with the insurance company, and work in the paradigm of Xactimate and those kinds of things, and then like you said, a fair and sustainable. I think those are huge things. So. It's been a nice beacon of hope, You do well in keeping people updated as much as you're able to on the details.
Yeah.
And, so I encourage people to read the article, check. You said the advocacy page, and then you're pretty active on social media as far as sharing your videos when you have something that is shareable. So
right.
Keep fighting the good fight, Ed.
Thanks. You too. We appreciate your help.
Yeah. Awesome.
Tell Frank I said hello.
Again, if you stuck with us through the video and my technological errors, a huge thanks to Ed for not only taking the time, but being gracious to help piece this interview together and salvage the content. Ed, as you can see, is very passionate and very knowledgeable about what he does. Some of the things that stuck out to me is those three things we talked about at the opening, contractors coming together. What comes to my mind is almost every organization that we market to or work with, whether it's IFMA or BOMA or local school organizations and those kinds of things, they all have advocacy components to them, and that's an essential part of what it means to be an industry and an organization, and combining our powers. And so, we all know when we combine forces together and work together, that helps us get closer to our goal and gain more momentum. And so, that's an interesting aspect with an industry that is built on people that are independent. Giving up a little bit of your independence to gain ground in what we all need for the greater good, is an interesting component of what the AGA is doing, and the RIA as a broader construct with advocating for contractors. I like Ed states in one of his updates that we need to be aggressive, diplomatic, and ethical, and like you talked about in the interview, we have to build something that's sustainable, and unfortunately it's to the point now where it's not looking sustainable, and Mark mentioned that mentions that in Our Greatest Need. And so we are all keenly aware, that the industry that we serve in and love and has built careers for many of us and our families, is there's definitely some things that need to change in order to keep it that way, and in a lot of ways regain some of the ground that's been lost. And so it's exciting to me. I think it gives us hope that it can be done. And those kind of things kind of reverberate in my head. That collaboration component, much easier said than done, especially when we're all very independent, and then that aggressive, ethical, and diplomatic, and so sometimes we forget to combine all three when we're setting up our approaches to things. And so it'll be very interesting to see how this progresses. There's information. Ed's got the restorationlawyer.com. The RIA website is full of information, their magazine and the advocacy page, and Ed's been very good about sharing updates on social media, and Restoration and Remediation magazine has been posting most of those. And so there's just a wealth of information, and the time is now for sure. So hope you enjoyed. Thank you.